Well, welcome everybody to the Icebreakers podcast. I'm Matt Evers. This is my beautiful co-host, Frankie Seaman, and we are going to start this episode actually with a bit of remembrance. As you may have heard in the media this week, several members of the United States figure skating team, family and coaches, were tragically lost in an airplane crash in Washington, D.C. this week. It was American Airlines Flight 5342 collided with a military helicopter on their final approach into Reagan Airport. And unfortunately, all 67 passengers lost their lives. And Frankie and I would like to dedicate this episode of the Icebreakers to the members of our community, especially the members of our skating community who are going through a lot right now, and we are sending their love. And Frankie, I know that you have some information that the U.S. Figure Skating Association has posted about this accident.
That's right, Matt. Our hearts are full of sorrow and grief, and I'm sure many people at home will have been affected by this awful news too. If you would like to help, you can donate to help the families of the victims. US Figure Skating has set up a fund, and it is at usfigureskatingsupport.org. So please do donate if you can, and our love and thoughts go to those families and those bereaved friends of the US figure skating community.
Icebreakers Season 2, Episode 4. Let's do it. Well, Frankie, how was your week?
I think, like you, Matt, we've all had a really, really tough week. In the global skating community, the news that was coming out of Washington has really, I think, broken all of our hearts. So obviously we're here to talk about dancing on ice, and of course we want to make sure that we honour the skaters that lost their lives, because first and foremost they were skaters and they would have wanted to be here tonight to see the skating. Obviously the European figure skating is also going on at the moment, and all we can do is honour their memories by speaking about the skating and making sure that we remember them.
Absolutely. Amen to that. And it's a little bit extra tragic, too. If you are a skating buff or a skating historian, you will remember back in 1960, the U.S. figure skating team, on their way to world competition, actually lost their entire team because, again, there was another plane crash back in the 60s. And the U.S. Figure Skating Association did set up a memorial fund, which is an incredible resource that helps fund up and coming skaters and people who need assistance within the sport. So, unfortunately, this has happened again. And I think it's just, again, it's like you said, this week we really hold our loved ones close and just realize that life is really short.
Yeah. And on top of that, we lost, of course, the legendary Dick Button, who is a titan of US skating. So it's been a really, really tough week, I think, for all of us. And I, for one, certainly didn't feel like putting on my makeup and dressing up this week. So thank you for being muted with me. But let's crack on with the show, because I think the people at home do want to hear all about dancing on ice.
Absolutely.
And we will try and keep you guys as up to date and as upbeat as we can, even in spite of the tragedy that we have all collectively suffered.
Yeah, and I think too, I think everybody in the skating community has felt what has happened this week, and it kind of showed a little bit on the ice tonight with Dancing on Ice. The skating tonight was kind of all over the shop, and you have to have compassion for what we as ice skaters are going through, and I think not necessarily the celebrities felt it as much as the pros did, but I'm sure that's weighed heavy on their heads and weighed heavy on their hearts throughout the week. And did it affect the live show? Possibly. I don't know. It's a little bit too much to say, but I think tonight's show was all over the place.
I mean, it was sketchy. I was like on the edge of my tiny little seat because some of those routines, I was holding my breath. Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, nobody was in a celebratory mood this week. Probably it wasn't a lot of fun backstage, and that, of course, is going to filter down through to the celebs. Of course, they won't probably have felt the loss in the same way that we have done, and they won't have been grieving collectively in the way that the pros will have been. However, they will have been affected by it, of course. But notwithstanding, I have to say that I think, these celebs, all of them across the board, and because it was consistently very sketchy and because everybody was consistently very trippy and tumbly and stumbly, I have to say I don't think to me that they look prepared enough. I don't feel like they look like they've
Mm.
had enough rehearsal time. The basics have left them. Now, when you have enough time to skate and to find skating and feel it within your body and to really connect with it, then when you're given choreography with a tight turnaround, which is what is happening now, they're only having 5 days really to turn this around, then the skating doesn't let you down. The basics are in your body, and you feel like, okay, I've got that. I know how to push forwards. I know how to do crossovers forwards and backwards, and you feel solid. But this set of celebs this year feels to me like they're underprepared, and that is not their fault by any means. I just feel like we know that they broke up early before Christmas. They had a long break, and I think now that's really becoming evident that they don't have the skating in their body, and they probably don't have enough time now to really go back and work on those basics because they're so busy scrambling to try and nail the choreography to get it ready for Sunday night show. And it's a real shame. There's only so much you can push your body through. There's only so many hours in the week that your body can actually be on the ice before you break. And on top of that, we're seeing all of these injuries. Now pros are getting injured as well because they're just underprepared. And I think, production has to really take a hard look at that and go back and say, maybe next year we give them just a little bit more time to prep and we don't have such a big break before the live show.
It's a really good observation, and I think, like you said, the injuries now we're week 4 into this television series, and the injuries are really starting to creep up. If we go through the housekeeping this week, Vanessa Bauer is out now because of a torn ligament and a level 3 sprain that she endured this week. And then again, we saw with Sam that Sam had a shoulder injury this week, and
A
I think.
dislocated shoulder, in fact.
And that potentially could have been, I'm thinking it was on the Saturday, which is their dress rehearsal. And I think it's this really hard line of pushing the couples to their best ability, but also so we get an entertaining television show, but also we have to find that fine line of then keeping it safe. And how do we do that? There isn't a science to that. And I think that's something that really, like you said, needs to be looked at for future series is how much time do these people need? How do we keep them as safe as we need to keep them? But then also, how do we produce a great television show, right?
Well, I think the
And
first episode we saw, they all came out, and the majority of them that are still left in it skated great. They all did a brilliant job, but they've been working on that routine for a month at
mhm.
least. And now that they're having this quick turnaround, everything is scrambly, everything is stumbly. They're just not where they should be in terms of the basics. And to a contestants' night, I feel each and every one of them had regressed. And I could see it in their basic skating. Each and every one of them, even the strongest of the skaters out there, to me, looked like on the edge of a fall, like they could trip or fall at any moment. And it's making them nervous. And the more nervous they're going to get, the less confidence they're going to feel. And if you can't skate with confidence, now you're second guessing yourself. Now you're going to overperform. And when you overperform to compensate for your lack of skating, that's when they trip and fall. And I'm sure that's what's probably happened, in a number of these cases.
Well, and you've said that multiple times on this season, but also even last season with Dancing on Ice and the icebreakers. But as they said, the skate off is back next week, which is going to add another level of insecurity to these celebrities' heads. We love it because we get to see more skating and we get to actually see somebody fight for that position. But I can only imagine what these celebs are going to be going through this week, thinking about, do I have to do the same number again, or are we going to have to get a second routine, as we've seen in multiple series previously, that they'll do a
I
different routine to the main skate off?
I don't think they can handle a second routine at this point, if I'm honest. Even just because they haven't practiced it yet. So even just the scramble backstage of getting changed into a second outfit is going to mess with their minds. I just don't think that any of them are stable enough on their feet to handle a second routine, and I certainly hope that's not the case. I hope that they're just going to repeat the routine that we just saw in the show. And also, I kind of want to see it done clean as well. So if you get a second chance, maybe you'll get it right. Poor things. I
100%.
feel for them.
I'd absolutely agree with everything you just said there. All right. Well, it was good to see, though, the opening number that they had with the celebrity reveals kind of went back to the old school, what we used to call the skate on, where it was
Yeah.
literally just a present, a wave, and a bow. And I do have to give props to Sam for turning around and finding the camera.
He definitely listened to the podcast last week because you told them to do that. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, Matt Evers, there we go.
I was so happy to see that.
What a pro. 10 out of 10 for that, for the skate on at least
Absolutely.
then.
So the first tonight to skate, Sir Steve and Vicky. Unfortunately, we lost Steve tonight, but as we all can probably agree, his skating ability just wasn't there. However, I have to say, his VT, I just really loved his attitude.
Yeah, I mean, he's an Olympian through and through. He knows competition and he knows when you're on the back foot in competition, you just have to dig down a little deeper. And I think that really came through in his VT. You know, Bon Jovi, It's My Life came out in 2000. I think he's a bit of a secret rocker, if I'm honest. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know why he was wearing shorts again. I'm not sure about that as a style
because we
choice
love
or
it.
him. It's been a theme throughout the entire series. So, I mean, but okay, but we'll forgive that. But I do think that, you know, he brought his Olympic medals. What a privilege for us to see those five Olympic medals on screen. The giant bronze statue of him. I used to live near to that statue. I used to see it regularly when I would walk in that park. And I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's actually even bigger than him, and he's pretty big guy. It was all about him, and I think he embodies Olympic spirit. Come on, like the guy's an absolute legend,
Mm.
but maybe not on the ice.
In regards to his costume decision with the shorts, the styling, I know Alexandra and you will break this down on the bonus episode this week on the lookbook, which comes out on Wednesday, as it does every Wednesday. So I look forward to hearing what you ladies have to say about that. But I liked seeing his legs, I got to say that. But he had improved. Again, we cannot deny that that performance didn't have some improvement compared to last week, and especially that first week. You know, he was doing, I know it is small.
He's
I know it was
he's
small,
so tiny,
but at least it was
minuscule.
something. At least it was something, right?
Well, we saw him do the cross rolls, which is one crossover one way and then one crossover the other way, and he did, you know, move from side to side, transfer his weight slightly. He was still doing a lot of 2 foot skating, and I think as Oti mentioned, he did have very sad arms. His arms were kind of not engaged to the rest of his body. So I tell you what, though, that air guitar was a bit of a highlight. Wow, wow.
Well, I actually wrote down, I was like, he actually had some choreography and it was pretty good. Ashley, 5.5. Odie gave him a 5. Jane and Chris both gave him 5.5s, which he totaled out at 21.5. You know, again, these critiques are a little bit frivolous now because he did go home. Odie, I have to say, thank you again for giving a critique, constructive criticism, right? She actually said, what you need to do now to get better is present Vicky. And I think this really needs to be done for all of the couples. We're going to get into this in a little bit too with some of the others where the critiques were just really like, "Oh, we're proud of you." Well, cool, but how you being proud of me obviously isn't going to give me a 10. How do I get up to that 10, right?
I mean, the judges were full of praise, which I again kind of disagree with a little bit. And you're right, OT was the only one that kind of gave him some sort of constructive criticism. I think, you know, it's nice to say, of course, it's nice to be supportive and give him some praise because you want him to be encouraged to improve again next week if he was to stay on. But I do think at this point, you know, it's no point just saying, we're so proud of you, you're doing so well. You're right, Matt, it's not enough. He needs to be told that he needs to bring his legs underneath him or that he needs to transfer his weight. Although Chris did get up and give him a little demonstration there, which I thought was nice and interesting.
He sure
I learned
did.
a lot from that.
Well, we sort of saw it on camera. They were having trouble trying to follow Chris around, but it is. I mean, I think
It
at
was
the end of the day,
loud as well as he was stamping his feet. I was like, oh, hello. Elephants are
and
coming.
I think the judges have such little time on
Yeah.
camera to give their, you know, obviously their critique and their criticism. So it's a fine line of telling somebody how proud you are, but at the same token, also saying, hey, this is actually what you need to work on.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
well done, Steve and Vicky. Congratulations on your 3 weeks of Dancing on Ice. I was fully entertained. I loved the attitude that you had, Steve. So yeah, well done. Thank you.
He seemed really sad when they were skating off, actually. I think it just hit him that he'd skated for the last time, presumably. So I felt bad for him, of course, but I think it was time.
And that's
He'd run
another
out of things
thing.
to do.
That is another reason why that skate off needs to come back. Historically, when you do that skate off, you know you have a 50-50 chance of staying. And so you give everything into that skate off performance. And that is sometimes your last skate. And the celebs really kind of understand that. And even as a professional, I really took in that moment of like, oh, this could be the last time that I'm going to have to skate with this person. And it means a little bit more. And
I agree
not
with you.
being able to have that moment has been rough, to say the least.
Yeah, Yeah, I haven't enjoyed it at all that it's just been down to the public vote because, well, what do you guys know? Obviously, you voted out some really great skaters so far, so boo, public boo.
Well, it's 50-50. We can't blame the public for everything, but
Boo, judges, boo.
yeah, there
I'm
you
just
go.
blaming everybody.
All right, well, moving swiftly along to Dan and Vanessa James skating to Blue Moon. I am in love with his grandmother. She stole the show for me. That VT with him, I have to say, I teared up.
Oh, 100%. And his late granddad and their love story. It was a love story of the ages. It was so nostalgic. And of course, Frank Sinatra. It just really evoked this whole vintage wartime era. It was just beautiful. I think we all teared up, obviously. I mean, it's
Mm.
been an emotional week, and that just really was the icing on the cake.
Well, and to have that historically now forever ingrained in television history, that he had that moment dancing with his grandmother was just absolutely beautiful. And then moving into his skating, when they set the scene, when it was that set piece and they were kind of feeling each other. I don't want to say feeling each other, that sounds horrible.
Rewind.
When they were sort of miming to each other through the set piece, it was stunning. One of the most beautiful creatives that I've seen in a really long time. And then he started skating.
Actual
Goosebumps.
goosebumps.
It totally. And his crossovers were delicious. Literally delicious. The edge work that he had. I was like, dang, this boy has improved so much in the 5 days that we saw him last week. And he was great last week, but he got even better this week.
Yeah, I didn't love his work last week. I thought he'd regressed a lot, and I think I said that. I thought he'd regressed a lot from the first week, but this week his posture was back. His skating was so smooth. I feel like his feet were directly underneath him. I think we talked a bit about that. The only thing I would say was that on his mohawks, his legs tend to get a little bit wide, so he's kind of
Yeah.
clunky on the mohawks. If he could just bring his feet together before he makes the turn on that mohawk, that would be lovely. But it was nostalgic, it was charming, it was romantic. It was just a really beautiful story. And I think all of us, having watched that VT, were just imagining his nan and granddad's dancing together or skating
Mm.
together. It was so beautiful.
I believe I counted 5 different handholds between he and Vanessa, as well as the choreography. The program was so beautifully balanced, and what I mean by that, it was like the perfect amount of solo skating, the perfect amount of partnering, the perfect amount of lifting, the
Yeah.
perfect amount of spins. It just had this flow from start to finish, and I didn't even mind that they started not really even skating because they were setting that scene. And again, it was perfectly timed. You didn't get sick of it. You weren't thinking about, oh, wait, they're just stood there doing choreography like we have seen with other couples sometimes. So I think in regards to the lift that you were talking about, the lift we saw in the VT. So I don't think anything happened with the actual execution of the lift. I think as he went to pick her up, the weight was just a little bit off. And if you go back and watch it, you can see his leg kind of wobble a little bit. So that just would have been a weight differential problem. But to the untrained eye, you would have never have known that there was anything wrong.
Well, good job we have a trained eye on site. I have to say, did you see the back inside death spiral? I mean,
Yeah.
hello.
That
Look,
is something that we see in competition.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, granted, he wasn't in the pivot, and I don't know if he'll ever get to that point, although his skating is strong enough that hopefully they are working on that. I'm sure Vanessa is doing some work with him on that. But I did think that when he got 35 out of 40, I was like, whoa, that's a really high score, especially for the start of the episode and the fact that we'd only previously seen Sir Steve skate, so we only really had to compare to him. But by the end of the episode, I was like, actually, really well deserved because it was a fantastic number. And they skated second. So, of course, production were listening to me last week saying it's a terrible routine to skate, terrible to put you in second place. And they skated second and proved me wrong again. I'll
Yeah.
take it. I'll take it for the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Top scores tonight. Ashley and Odie, both 8.5s. Jane and Chris, 9s, 35 out of 40. That is 4 points up from his score last week. Interesting judges' comments. I'm going to preface this because another routine that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I have a lot of questions about some of what the judges were saying. However, Ashley said he was most invested. He was really connected to the story, that he really found that character. Chris said the quality was A plus. Odie, he finally did it. That connection that he had with Vanessa, and I have to say it was spot on. I
Yeah, but
just
they've always had a connection. I don't know why they keep going on about this connection because I feel like they've always had a great connection. They're working together really well. So blah blah.
and then thankfully Jane mentioned his edges. If we're going to obviously talk about the skating, the edge quality is something that you really have to applaud him for, because that is, in regards to the skating, that is the hardest thing to achieve. And you
Yeah.
hear the judges comment on that with some of the other competitors. It's like, we need to see your edges more. Frankie, what does that entail, this edge work?
So, for people at home who don't know anything about ice skating, the blade has two edges on it. It's a very, very, very thin piece of metal, but each side is called an edge. You have an inside edge, which is the part of the blade which relates to the inside of your leg, and you have an outside edge, which is the part of the blade which relates to the outside of your edge. And in between that, there's a slight dip in the middle, I guess is how you would describe it. Now, this allows you to skate around corners because if you need to go over to the left-hand side, you will use your left foot left outside edge, which means you will transfer your weight onto the left side of your body, the left side of your skate, and then ultimately to the left edge of your blade. And what happens is with a lot of skaters when they're not confident and they're not comfortable is they'll stick in the middle of the blade using both edges at the same time. They can maybe transfer onto one foot, that's great, but can they transfer onto one edge within that one foot? And oftentimes they can't. They get stuck in the middle and they're skating kind of straight, and to go around a corner they have to twist their body in a weird way to make it happen and force it. But with Dan, what we're seeing is that perfect transition of his body weight from the center of his blade to the outside edge and then back again to the inside edge, which gives you a really smooth running, flowing, speedy edge, and you don't lose any speed then when you're on one leg, when you're not pushing. Is that okay?
And it just, yeah, that was awesome. It breaks down to the quality of what the skate is actually doing in comparison to what we're actually seeing. And you can hide it sometimes, but when you see it done good, like Dan had tonight, it's very apparent.
And it's seamless as well. I think when somebody like Dan does it, you shouldn't notice it. When people aren't doing it is when you notice the skating and it feels a bit clunky and a bit clumsy, but you're not really sure why. And he has got a great body transition now, and I think long may he continue because that skating was smooth.
All right, moving on. Skating third, Molly and Colin skated to This Is Me. The opening shot of them starting on the platform, just so strong. And I was really interested to see how they were going to get themselves off of that platform, because that can be really clunky sometimes, but it just
Yeah.
worked really seamless. And then as she started to skate, she did that forward lunge and it was strong. But I felt a little bit like the excitement started to overtake the skating performance, because I just felt like the steps started to get really rushed. And like I was worried she was going to trip because of that excitement, because her body weight got sort of ahead of her feet a little bit.
She reminded me of Michaela on week one. She got overexcited and she was so desperate because it's such a huge tune. I mean, that is a massive track and you can't help but be overtaken by it. It kind of consumes you and then it feels like
Hmm.
this fire inside of you, like I want to really attack this track. And you have to, of course, but you have to have been doing that in practice. And we spoke about this last week. You cannot practice these things in rehearsals and then on the night decide to take it up a notch because it just becomes across as overexcitement. It comes across as a little bit desperate that you want to impress. And actually, you should be practicing this in the week and then you won't get tripped up. And I felt like Michaela Strachan had the same issue on week one. She was so excited to be there and she so wanted to impress us that she pushed forwards with her body, and this is her performance stance. But actually, what that does to you on your blade is it pushes you forwards on your blade, and then you're in the trip zone. I mean,
Mm,
she released beast mode. She full on went for it, and I love that. But girl, you got to practice that in rehearsals. You can't just do it on the night.
totally. And I think too, something to be said, they did the exact same lift that Dan and Vanessa did too, which is that undercarriage, holding by the skate and by the leg. Now, I guess something went wrong on it, which I didn't realize, but Jane had mentioned it in her comments that she gave Colin the wrong leg for the lift and he still put it up. So at least there was a little bit of a variation between the two lifts, but it's something that we have said last season on this podcast, as well as so far this season too, is we're seeing a lot of the same tricks.
We
And
saw that same lift last week as well. So I think it was Charlie and Eric did the same lift last week when they skated to go. So that's the third time we've now seen it in 2 weeks. She did give him the wrong leg, but then she corrected herself. So they actually ended up doing it on the correct leg. And actually props to Colin because obviously it took a second or two for her to swap legs and for him to be able to grab the right leg. And he still managed to do the lift and make sure that they finished at the end of the music on time.
mm,
But yeah, we need new tricks, guys. I don't know who's overseeing at the moment, but they need to change it up, or they need to kind of make sure that people are doing different lifts on the same week because we're just seeing the same thing. And this show's all about creativity, so we do need. And I said it even on week 2. I'm like, we need to see some more tricks. We're getting pull
mhm.
throughs and cartwheels galore.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The judges, Ashley and Odie, scored Molly 8s. Jane and Chris both gave her 7.5s. That was a total of 31. Now, that was 1 point up from last week. And I think the judges' comments, again, as we sort of mirrored, it was very inspirational. Her story is extremely inspirational. And Jane really liked the interpretation that she had. And that the transitions, she mentioned about the transitions again, that you need to choreograph things in a way so that you're not just looking at separate sections and that one thing flows into the other. And you can go back and listen to last week's podcast because we did discuss a lot about the transitions. Ashley really thought that she came to life in this. And Chris had said something very interesting, and I kind of applauded him for it. He said that as good as she is and as beautiful as that routine was, that we're now starting to become a little bit wary of the skating skills.
They were
Now,
very exposed tonight, I thought. She's brave, and that routine was a brave choice. The music was a brave choice. She's brave in real life, but it just felt very forced and like she was forcing us to realize that she's brave. We already know that, so she needs to relax into that skating. And I felt that, every step she took, she was just a little bit too far forwards, too far backwards. She just wasn't really quite in the right place on her skate, and that's what I think Chris was alluding to. But again, I just don't think they've had enough time to nail those basics so that they're in their body.
mm, yeah, it just felt like they're. No, I agree. It felt like they hadn't had enough time to rehearse the routine because the performance almost felt like a rehearsal. The skating on a skating level, the performance
Yeah.
she was trying to give everything, but because the skating level wasn't rehearsed enough, it was like the performance got away from her. All right, skating fourth, Sam and Molly, Baba O'Reilly. Really loved this VT. I love the fact that he's taking this opportunity on Dancing on Ice to really kind of give thanks to his history with Coronation Street and that he's still so proud of that job. Sometimes people leave professions and they don't ever want to talk about it again. They move on with their life. And, for him to sit with one of his elders that was on the show with him, on the soap with him for however long he's been on it now, it must be almost 20 years, was a really special moment. It was really nice.
Yeah, that was Malcolm, his surrogate granddad. And I think what we could really see there was like the Jedi Master and the Jedi
Yeah.
Apprentice. Malcolm had imparted all of this acting knowledge and skill that he's amassed over the decades. And then he got this new little 10-year-old kid. And you could see that Sam had really taken to Malcolm and taken all of that advice on board. And Malcolm kept saying, "You were great. You never did this. You never did that. You were so good." I thought it was just such a lovely, heartwarming moment. And we've all had people in our lives and in our careers that have inspired us and that have been that mentor that stepped into that role. And it's difficult. Our careers or our industry is very competitive, and it's quite
Hmm.
easy for older actors to sort of become a little bit, jaded, a little bit jealous of like who does this young pup think he is. So I thought it was really lovely that Malcolm had reached out to him and they connected across the generations in that way. I thought it was very heartwarming.
It was great. Now, I gotta say, Sam out of the gate, I just wrote down, wow. Like, I thought this performance was going to be a smash hit. That knee slide that he did is so incredibly difficult. As easy as it looks, I have to give him 10 points just for that. But
I
then,
basically said to David, wow, just give him the trophy and let's all go home. His
yeah.
skating is in his body. It's phenomenal.
But then, something happened. What it looked like is that little cartwheel move, turny thing that they were trying to do just didn't land well, or sort of halfway through, as he opened up his feet to execute the turn, it then just sort of fell on itself, and it created a stumble. And then looked like he was like how I feel right now. Like, what's next? What are we supposed to do? Where are we going with this? Right now, I think literally deers in a headlight. And until you've had a moment like that on live television, you cannot teach what to do, because you cannot plan for it. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how your mind is going to react. You don't know how your body is going to react. And I have had those moments myself, but also with celebrities. Frankie, I know that you have as well, because we've been on the ice together, and you've looked at me and you've said, I don't know what's next. Help me. And I
We've
have
all
done the same to you.
We've all had those moments, and it's a little bit like, woo, where am I? Who am I? And what am I doing here? It's like
Yeah.
you've just been transported in from an alien environment, and then boom, you're back in the room. But obviously, as professional skaters, we know how to deal with those moments, and boom, we get on with it. I was worried that he wasn't going to recover, and actually, he didn't really recover. But even before that cartwheel lift that you're talking about, where he stumbled, he did come out like a rocket, and his skating is phenomenal. And honestly, he looked like a winner tonight for those first few bars of the music. But when he skates with Molly, I feel that he leans onto her instead of pulling her onto his circle. So we just need to teach him how to lead as a leading man, because he's more than capable. He just, I think, is hasn't been taught yet to not rely on Molly. And I think, their partnership is still a little bit rough for me. It's not quite where it should be. And I don't know who taught Sam to skate originally in his 30 hours that he did before he skated with Molly, but they did an amazing job with him. And I think the last couple of weeks we've seen him regress. However,
Mm.
obviously, we didn't know that he dislocated his shoulder. So maybe he just emotionally felt like he needed to lean on her. But then it
Yeah.
all kind of went wrong. He tripped, he stumbled, and then he never really recovered from that. He just managed to scrape through.
Molly is new this year. This is the first time that she's been with Dancing on Ice. And Molly, if you're listening, I cannot stress enough. In moments like that, communicate. Don't be worried that you're live on television, and if you have to scream something from across the rink, or if you're close to them enough, give them audio cues. And I know, yes, as the pro, it can be shocking as well, and it's like you're trying to find your own feet and then get your celebrity back to their feet. But don't be scared to communicate, because that is the only way sometimes that you can get both of yourselves back on track to get to wherever you need to within that choreography. And, fortunately they ended on time, but I think we probably missed out on a good probably 20 to 30 seconds of choreography that we just will never see now. So,
Well, his confidence dropped immediately the minute that he tripped, and you're right. Then psychologically, he was leaning on Molly. Not only had he physically already been leaning on her, but then psychologically he was leaning on her, and I feel like she probably was also a little bit shocked, and they
yeah.
they both just looked a little bit shell shocked. And at that point, you have to take control as the female, as the pro partner. You have to take control and be like, listen to me, come back to me, come back to me. This is it. I'm in control. This is my environment. I know what I'm doing. If you follow me, I'll get you there. And that's a trust issue, and that's a partnership issue. So I think that's probably something they need to work on. He didn't ever quite recover from the tumble, and I'm surprised at that, because he's quite a confident, kind of positive guy. So I
Mm.
really thought that even despite the tumble, he would. However, at that point, we didn't realize that he had already dislocated his shoulder. So I should imagine he's probably feeling very vulnerable and very fragile, and actually probably quite scared of the ice again, because once you've had a really awful fall like that, that fear factor kicks in, and it takes a good couple of days, good couple of sessions, maybe even a week or so for you to then trust the ice again.
The scores definitely reflected the stumble, with Ashley and Odie giving him sevens, Jane and Chris giving him a 7.5s, total of 29. Now, if we look back at last week, he had a 32.5, so that was 2.5 points below last week. Again, they are scoring. They still were high because his basic skating is good, and he still started the routine by attacking it, and he didn't give up. He still ended it. Looking at what the judges actually said, that he definitely was attacking this performance, keep doing what you're doing. And now with what Odie said, with finding a character, and she said, Sam, we need you to find the character within yourself, right? And now, first off, Sam's a brilliant actor already, but this sort of contradicts what Dan was told. Dan was told to make up a character, which is what he did this week, and go with it. So, do do we want to see them be themselves, or do we want to see them being characters? Frankie, help me, because I'm confused.
Do you know what? You lost me at hello.
Well, then goodbye. I
I
mean,
think, look, I think sometimes when you see a routine that's gone to pieces and when you see a celeb that's gone to pieces, you just kind of pick at the first thing you grasp at the first thing you can. And of course, his character wasn't shown because he was so nervous. He had tripped, he didn't recover from the stumble. He kind of just went to pieces a little bit. And I think she probably was hoping that if he tried to characterize more next week, it might help him in case that happens again. Because look, stumbles, trips, and falls happen on Dancing on Ice. That's just how it is. And you celebs have to accept that, and you have to know in your head that sooner or later I'm going to fall on live TV. And yes, it's a shock, and yes, it's embarrassing, but the way that you deal with that, that is character building. And perhaps Oti was trying to say that if he focused on his character, then it might help him get back into character if that happened again, and then it would help him to just recover. Maybe, but I
okay,
mean, I don't know what.
I'll
Yeah,
buy that.
it's very contradictory. I'm trying to justify it. Sorry.
And again, I think this is the first time we've seen on the series so far that somebody has had a situation like that to where they've stumbled and then something's happened and they've not been able to get back into the performance. So
I'm just
again,
thinking about Ryan last year when he tripped and fell
yeah, I
in
mean,
Club
literally,
Tropicana.
it just kept going because that's all you can do because that music ain't gonna stop, right?
That's why.
Well, hopefully next week he will be fully recovered from this shoulder injury. We'll see Sam as we know Sam to be. So work hard this week, Sam, please. All right, Charlie and Eric, someone like you, a huge track. Well done for taking on the challenge because it's not she's not an easy artist to skate to because you expect so much. But as we saw in Charlie's VT, she is struggling from confidence. But I still felt that some of this performance tonight was still looked a little scared.
Charlie's in her head. It's a psychological game that she's playing with herself. She's second guessing everything that she does, and this is probably coming from a place of self confidence. As in on the ice, I'm sure in real life she's probably full of confidence, but on the ice she does look scared. She does look nervous, and we're feeling that, and it's making us nervous. And Adele is a huge track to skate to, and granted she had the love of her daughter to emote and to inspire her. I actually. It wasn't the best skating, but I did feel that she'd improved. Last week they asked her to land the lifts on one leg, and she really made a huge effort to do that.
Hmm.
I don't think she's really gonna catch the skating pack, the likes of Sam and Michaela and Dan, because their skating is so great already. I just think she's going to do her own improvements little by little, week by week, for as long as she stays in. But every week she comes, she tells us a really lyrical, emotional, soulful story, and I enjoy the performances. I enjoyed last week. It was Ghost. Obviously, we felt like Patrick Swayze was in the room with us last week, and we didn't have that distraction this week, so I got to concentrate a little bit more on the skating. But the next spin that she did, she's got beautiful lines. I think she's a really balletic, soulful skater, and I enjoy watching her. I don't really need to critique her too much because I think she takes the judges' comments on board. She's got Eric, who's a fantastic professional, and I think it is what it is. I'm not expecting greatness from Charlie, but I am enjoying watching her.
I think the start of that routine was just stunning. It was absolutely beautiful. It was shot well. It was lit well. She looked gorgeous. And then as it started to move on, that's when I started to feel, oh, it's just a little bit stiff. Now her pointing her toes, as we've said previously, and what the judges commented on previously as well, is getting a lot better. And I was really happy to see that improvement. And I do want to mention too, that last lift that they did, which is the necklace lift, which she's spinning, hanging around Eric's neck, is a really difficult lift because you have to put a lot of trust in your pro in order to do that. And it was absolutely beautiful. Now, to add to what you said, she is in her head, and her head does get in the way. If I can give you any advice, Charlie, and I know you believe in Eric, and you have that trust in Eric. However, I think it's a matter of letting everything go, and we want to sort of feel and see that abandonment that you get with Michaela sometimes, where you don't think about anything but the task at hand. Try not to let that that fear get in there of like, oh, I'm a little bit scared. And you could even see it sometimes in Charlie's VT when they were rehearsing. If we can get some more of that abandonment of your skating into these performances and into the training, I think she could catch up with the rest of the pack. But there may not be enough time for that.
Yeah. I'm enjoying what she's doing. I can't really fault her from a performance point of view, but yeah, the skating's not really there. And I think she's not. Why are you laughing?
'Cause you're honest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really that, but she knows that, and that's why she's not feeling confident because her skating isn't safe underneath her yet, and she is getting better week by week. And I think it's a beautiful thing to see. It's really what Dancing on Ice should be about. It shouldn't be all about the great skaters. You know, when we look back at Sam's original VT, he was terrible when he started, and now he's a great skater. I just think with Charlie that it isn't I don't think it's that she has no confidence in Eric. I think she has no confidence in herself.
Hmm. Okay. Fair enough. And that is something to work on for sure. The judges were 7.5s and 8s across the board, total of 31. Jane said that she really enjoyed them taking that Charlie took on the critiques from last week of like you said, Frankie, landing the lifts on one foot. I really enjoyed Odie's comment. She said, "You took the nerves out and replaced it with breath." That really hit me. Uh,
Resonated.
yeah, I think it was really something that we can all, on a day-to-day basis, learn from. When you start to feel that, I mean, as we all know, the world is a crazy place right now, and me, especially being here in the United States, there are a lot of times during the day when that anxiety starts to pull up, right? And I have to consciously stop what I'm doing and take a breath, and it does help. And I think it was really nice for Odie to see that, and I enjoyed that comment.
I think sometimes as well people underestimate the power of breath. The power of breath before you step into the tunnel or onto the ice. I think a lot of people forget that when you're nervous, you tend to breathe it all in and your shoulders come up to here, which again changes the center of your gravity, changes your balance on the ice. So you have to remember to breathe out and let that go. But you also have to remember to choreograph breathing spaces within each routine. And that is a skill in itself to find those moments to breathe. And it does really help you to then reconnect with your feet and reconnect with the ice, because if you breathe out, everything drops, and we as skaters need a lower center of gravity. But if you're breathing in constantly and you get really nervous like this, your shoulders end up towards your ears. So remember, people, to choreograph those breaths out at least 2 or 3 times during that routine.
And I agreed with Chris's comment too. The eye contact with Eric was sublime. They never lose eye contact, and that is so important. And again, I think we all can agree that with Ashley that this was her best skate yet. So well done, Charlie. Keep going. Small steps. All right, Anton and Annette. Antoinette. They skated.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just going to say it.
Go for it.
I love Antoinette. I love Antoinette. I love them. They're my little guilty pleasure. All right, he's not the best skater, although he's slowly and steadily moving up that leaderboard, and his skills are
Hmm.
slowly and steadily creeping up and getting better. But I just love him. He's like the most darling little thing. I just want to put him in my pocket and walk around with him and have a little bit of Antoine every single day. He's just so cute. David and I were watching it actually, and we were cheering him on because I just think the whole VT when he went to Peckham, of all places, like where he's from, he's so grounded, he's so
Yeah.
rooted.
Yeah.
And he told us a little bit about the story of his mom and obviously Rio, and they didn't have a lot, and there she was making his life magical despite the fact that they, didn't grow up in these grand palatial circumstances. And the way that he appreciated everything that his mum had done for him was absolutely beautiful. I think
Hmm.
all the hearts melted. He melted the ice, and that was before he'd even stepped out. So I mean, if I think every mom in the world wants to be held in such high regard, and the fact that he had lost his mom, and this was the funeral song that they played at the service. No, no, there was no dry eye in the house. There was not a
No.
dry eye in the house. It was absolutely stunning. It was
I mean, I
heartfelt, it was emotional, it was warm. It was a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to pay tribute to somebody and to memorialize them on ice, because let's face it, this is an entertainment show. It's fun, it's celebratory, it's kind of kooky and quirky. It's not serious, okay? So when you take somebody's, a loved one, particularly, a really close family member like your mom, and then you try to memorialize them on the ice, that can go horribly wrong. Everybody's looking for the comedy in this show, but this was a real moment of gravity and depth, and it made us all kind of hold our breath because nobody wanted it to go wrong for him tonight. We all wanted it to be just perfection, and it was,
It
despite,
was.
as Ashley said, it wasn't a perfect routine, but it was just one of those moments that you don't forget, that you get lost in, and that you want to stay lost in for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, from the start of the music, the spin that he did, the dancing, again, I kind of appreciated the fact that the dancing stood still for a little bit because you could see the judges in the background and they were smiling from ear to ear. Like you could really feel that. And I would have loved to have been in the studio at that point to actually feel the energy in the room of what he was doing and the speed that he had this week too. Like we've seen speed with him, we know he can skate, right? But
Yeah.
when they came flying around that corner and then doing the twizzles and the footwork that he had to keep that performance level going during all of the skills that he was executing. And then at the end with the drape lift, the overhead lift. I mean, I loved it. I loved it from start to finish.
I
Oh,
did,
and
and then the little spin that they did at the end with the flip out. I mean, okay, it wasn't perfect, but it was just so. I think everybody on the inside was going, "Go on, son, go on, son, go on, yay!" at the end because we just all wanted him to have this beautiful moment and this beautiful connection to his late mom, and I think he just absolutely nailed it. He was the prince of the ice, actually. In fact, he was the king of the ice. He was the king of the ice. He was the king of Peckham. Give him the crown. Let's go home. We're done.
it was so smooth. It was so steady. It was so silky. Well done. I mean, you could tell that they worked hard this week because I personally, I just absolutely loved it. The judges loved it too. 8.5s straight across the board, a total of 34. Jane obviously credited the great lifts that they had. Like you said, Frankie, Ashley pointed out that it wasn't a perfect performance, but it was perfectly him. And that is what I think we are trying to always see with these partnerships is that yes, you bring yourself to the ice, but you then bring this like amplified version of the yourself that's learned how to skate. Chris pointed out those Ina Bowers that he was doing into those back crossovers are really difficult, and they were done side by side, not in a hold. And props to Anton for continuing to show versatility because every week now he has brought something different.
But I have to say, 100% his mum would have loved it. Can I give a big fanfare, please?
Yes.
Because next to skate, it's Chris. Sorry, Chris, we do love you. But more importantly, the return of our favourite pro, Robin. Welcome back, Robin.
Welcome
Robin
back,
Johnston.
Robin. Wow. Well done, first and foremost. You have had 24 hours to learn the routine, to finesse the routine, to get Chris to trust you enough to go out there. I mean, it was not the best performance by any means, but oh my God, what an achievement. Congratulations, Robin, and welcome back to the show.
First and foremost, because we all call her Chooch. But
I won't ask
Robin,
why.
she probably hadn't even met Chris yesterday. This is just bonkers, before this accident happened. And here they are skating together like they've been together for years.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just ignore the little bit that went wrong. But other than that, I mean, well done. 10 out of 10 for effort, you guys.
No, can we discuss the creative? When I saw that they announced when Dancing on Ice announced the song titles, and it was like, oh, Adele, Waka Waka, Blue Moon, and then it was like the Pokemon theme, and I went, what in God's name are they gonna do to that? And I went, this is so Chris Taylor. It is unbelievable that only him would have brought something like Pokemon to the ice.
Do you know what? I loved it because I'm a big Pokemon fan. So, my youngest stepson and I, when Pokemon Go went live, and you could sort of like hunt Pokemons all over the globe. Whenever we went on holiday, we'd be out hunting Pokemons, or whenever we went shopping, we'd be out hunting Pokemons. So I'm actually a big fan. So I didn't think it was as abstract, probably as somebody that's not a fan of Pokemon would think. I actually really, really thought it's actually something that Dancing on Ice is all about. It's just fun and silly and a bit bonkers. And Chris
Yeah.
is fun and silly and a bit bonkers. And actually, when we met his parents in the VT, I was like, like, how did they produce someone that's so completely off their radar? Because they were just like, normal sort of suburban couple having a lovely cup of tea in their house. And then they have this like bonkers crazy dude. And I'm like, well, fair play for allowing him to be his true self.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, unfortunate fall, but great recovery. Now I have to say too, and I'm by no means am I dogging this camera on the ice. I seem to be, throughout this episode. But given the situation of what Robin and Chris had to go through in the past 24 hours, learning to skate with somebody new. Yes, Robin is a pro. She can do this in her sleep. But to have that extra person on the ice, that camera on the ice, kind of threw me off a little bit. And I thought it was just a little bit unfair because it is a distractment when there is that camera on the ice and it's following you around or going around in circles and this, that, and the other, and it flies out of the tunnel and goes, past you and then flies back through the tunnel. I thought that was a little bit of an unfair choice. Now, did it distract them? I don't know because they didn't mention it, but I thought that they may have given them a little bit of a safer camera block this week, given the fact of, them having to basically, hi, what's your name?
Hi, I'll be your partner for the day. Would you like fries with that order? Sure, let's go. I
Exactly.
think I love. I'm starting to really fall in love with Chris. I think he's really cool and fun and quirky, and I really appreciate that he's not your standard dancing on ice contestant by any means, but he's good. Like I see moments of greatness within Chris, but the one word that I would use for him is inconsistency. In fact, he is consistently inconsistent. So at least he's consistent in that. I just don't see why he can't bring what he does in the week to the show. And of course, this was an extraordinary week for them, so we can't really judge them on that. I'm sure their heads were all over the place and they did an amazing job of keeping it together. But you see him come out and he's like he's been shot out of a cannon and he's doing great. And then all of a sudden, he kind of takes it off into a different direction. And it feels like that wasn't rehearsed. And he kind of starts to improv a bit. Dude, you cannot improv on ice. And obviously, it would have felt like the whole routine was improv because he's got a brand new partner. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just trying to be constructive. So for future weeks, he can just work on that and make sure that he's doing consistently what he does in rehearsals on the night because when he's good, he's great.
Yeah, he really is, and he's got potential to be absolutely incredible. But I think you're right, Chris. Just stick to the script and do put the time in. And now that you've got a healthy partner, I think, and Robin's track record as well, she has a fantastic sort of pedigree with dancing on ice, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how Chris his future journey now with this series with a different partner. Unfortunately, because of the fall, Chris scored 7s and 7.5s, total of 28, which in comparison to last week was 2 points below last week. But fair enough, they have to take a deduction for that fall. Chris and Ashley both really commented on the fact of his imagination and really bringing his unique style to the ice, which, sort of mirrored what you said, Frankie, or echoed what you said. And we all agreed, like, when something like that happens, you have to rise to the occasion. And he fought really hard to stay on that ice for the rest of that routine. So well done. And
Can we just have
welcome.
a little chat?
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but can we just have a little chat about that hyper extreme spread eagle he did? That was bonkers.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, he's bringing really cool stuff to the ice. This is what I'm saying. I see moments of real greatness, and I'm like, yeah, go get him. He's gung ho. That's what he is. That's his new name is gung ho, Chris gung ho, because he's going all out, and I love it. But just sometimes I'm like, dude, just don't go all out. Just go a little bit in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Keep it contained. Keep it contained. Now, somebody who may not, for me, have kept it contained tonight, Michaela and Mark skating to Waka Waka.
Eminem.
I,
I'm just going to call them Eminem
Eminem,
from now on.
fair enough. I wanted to love this because I love Michaela, but something just didn't hit with me tonight. I felt like it was almost too hard. Mark's
Yeah.
choreography is brilliant, but I felt like maybe he gave her a little bit too much.
Yeah, it was scrappy and it was a bit scratchy. And I think, we know that she comes out of the gates super fast, super confident. Her skating skills are great. Her feet are normally underneath her. She can tend to get a little bit ahead of herself. But this music makes you want to get ahead of yourself. I would
Mm.
not thank anybody for picking this music to choreograph to or to skate to because it was tough. It was a tough track. It didn't really have any
Well,
high
she picked
points.
she picked it herself.
I know, but she doesn't know skating, does she? So she probably
No,
really
I
likes
know.
to track. When you're dancing in your kitchen, you're like, yeah, I could skate to this. And then you put it on the ice and you're like, oh, what was I thinking? I mean,
Yes. Well, and
I
given
like
the
that it echoed her South African roots, and then OT was in love with it 'cause it echoed her South African roots as well. But I think, as far as an actual track to skate to, that was tough.
And given the fact that they only have 5 days to rehearse these pieces of music, I will say, as a professional, I don't know if 5 days would have been enough for even pros to be able to do that to its standard of what it could have been, especially with Mark's choreography, because Mark is a brilliant choreographer and he knows how to do those steps. But unfortunately, it just, and what the judges said too is that the sync was off in
Oh,
a lot of
so
places,
far
right?
off.
And it's hard to have staccato movements like that. The toe work, the heel work that they were doing in 5 days, it was a big ask. And unfortunately, she still scored brilliantly because her basic skating skills are so good, and her performance was A plus. But it just wasn't as refined as we've seen, especially last week from The Sound of Music. That was spotless, right?
I think that she scored so highly because I think the judges took into account how hard that choreography was, and
Yeah.
that actually the base score of such a difficult routine was going to be higher than somebody that came out and did a clean routine to something that was much more simple. So I think when you look at that routine, it's complex, it's complicated, it's trippy, it's tricky. There are multiple places where you think she could trip here, she could fall here, this could trip her up. So I thought she handled it really well. 5 days was not enough time, of course it wasn't. And I know, like, even I saw that they were off time, they weren't together, like you said, they weren't syncopated. And when we think back to Antoinette, when they were doing those syncopated crossovers going around the corner, and how perfectly in time that wasn't his dancing, and his rhythm at the top of his routine was so perfectly in time, and then you compare that to Michaela, it was off and it was rough. And I think even Mark, when they did that last lift at the end and he had his hands underneath her skates and she's in kind of like a split around him, and he went into a spread eagle, even he was off, and we don't see that from Mark ever. And I
Yeah.
actually even texted him and said well held, because I thought he did a fantastic job of holding that together and containing that. And it was actually, yeah, I think we all just felt it was a bit rough around the edges.
Now, I know we're sort of dogging on this right now, but if we actually go and look at what was inside of that routine, it was amazing. The pushes, I will say, Michaela, please, Mark, work on her toe point, because when you do a forward stroke, that toe ends up pointing down after the push, and it really needs to sort of point out. However, the back teapot that she did, I can't do one of those.
Seriously, that is some serious thigh strength. She just dropped down into that teapot. I was like, where's she go? I thought she'd fallen over. And no, there she was skating backwards on a backward outside edge. Not even a forwards teapot, but a backward teapot. But
Yeah.
she didn't care. Got up just like it was nothing. And the judges didn't even really reference how hard that is.
Yeah, yeah, it is so difficult. I mean, I would have been able to do it 20 years ago, but if I tried a back teapot now, I would just hit the deck. I wouldn't get
She's
up.
58 years old. Girl has got some serious strength there.
Yeah, and like you said too, I think the something went wrong at the end. We don't know
Yeah.
what, but they ended facing upstage or facing the back basically. So, and then one of the judges had mentioned that, well recovered on that last lift. So I'm sure we'll hear next week, or I'm sure
Somebody
you'll hear.
said that, yeah, I think one of the judges mentioned that they had gotten stuck together, their costumes got stuck together, and that's what it seemed like because they couldn't quite complete that rotation. I think they were sort of co-joined. Sometimes that can happen with costuming, and so I think Alexandra Schauman and I will discuss that on the bonus episode, the Icebreakers Lookbook, when we break down the costumes a little bit more. We'll have a review of that and just see exactly what happened there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to that. All right, well, let's have a look at the leaderboard. Dan and Vanessa were top there with 35. Annette and Anton were 34, tied with Michaela and Mark. Molly and Colin, Charlie and Eric were tied at 31. Sam and Molly, 29. Chris and Robin, 28.5. Steve and Vicky at 21.5. And now, they have said that the Skate Off is back next week. We are looking very much forward to this because we'll get to see two more skating performances. And we also do have to give props for Mark Henretti choreographing the voting window number. It was absolutely beautiful. Congratulations, Mark, on your first real big choreography job on Dancing on Ice.
Finally!
Finally, long overdue. As we know, if you follow Mark's career, he is a brilliant choreographer for a lot of the competitive skaters that are out there. He's also choreographed some of the stuff that we did with the professionals on ice. So it was really nice to see Mark taking a step back and not performing in his own number and allowing the pros to do his work. And I really enjoyed it. So well done, Mark.
That was a shining example of a brilliant creative. I just think the whole thing was just chef's kiss. It was absolutely stunning. But did the viewers at home notice that Vanessa Bauer was featured heavily in that routine? Obviously, we know that she's injured. And that is because the pro routines are, of course, pre-recorded and then just slotted into the live episode on the night. So don't be thinking that she was trying to pull a sickie when she was really fine. She actually is injured, but she had pre-recorded that routine.
For sure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Icebreakers podcast with Matt Evers and Frankie Seaman. Thank you, Frankie, for joining me as always. I mean, I don't give you a choice, but we will see you on this week's bonus episode. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Alexandra Shaman and I will be breaking down the looks, the hair, the makeup, the costumes, the creatives. We'll be doing all of that on the Icebreakers lookbook later this week.
Fantastic. And make sure that you guys like, subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss an episode. You know what to do, but I gotta tell you, so just in case you've forgotten. And we shall see you same place, same time next week. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great week, and we will see you very soon.
And please do remember, if you'd like to donate to the US Figure Skating Fund for the families of the victims of the plane crash last week, that is at usfigureskatingsupport.org.